So I think we're live now, but to be sure, I want somebody to please text, comment down below if we're live or not. We have one person being okay. We're live. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Favina's Perfect Beer Talks webinar. My name is Enki, and I will be your guest, your host. Sorry, your host once again today. So today's guest is somebody who I am very excited to be interviewing and to have the possibility to have a conversation with for an entire hour. It's a she, yes, different from most of Pavina's Perfect Beer Talks webinars. This time we have a woman, and we don't have just any woman. We have the co-founder and CEO of Draftline Technologies. So Jennifer Hauke is the founder of Draftline Technologies. And Draftline Technologies is a provider of software and market analytics related to the draft beer service management and real-time market analytics for beer wholesalers and third-party service companies. Draftline Data and Draftline Technician provides market insights and quality assurance on over 1 million draft lines at 90,000 locations all around US. So a lot of big numbers. And I'm very excited to basically ask the person who is doing all of this how she does it. So Jennifer Hauke, welcome to Perfect Beer Talks webinar.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here and, to talk to another lady that's in the draft business. Love it.
I'm very excited you said yes. Thank you so much for sparing your time to come over to the Beer Talks webinar. And I just want to start with a very quick cheers. You can't have perfect webinar without a perfect pint, right?
I wish. It's too early for me to be drinking beer yet today, but those who know me well know that, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. And so
yes,
cheers.
It's 6 p.m. here, so I think I deserved it. But let's go ahead with the first question. Can you please share with us a bit about your journey in the draft industry and what inspired you to pursue a career in this field?
Well, that's a great question. So, number one, I was born into the industry in Detroit. It was not anything that I pursued. Let's put it that way, especially initially. So, my dad started in the business, I would say, I think it was in the 60s. And he worked for a small company in Detroit called Hudson Industries that worked on pumps. And there's this weird thing in southeastern Michigan, all around the Detroit area, where all these people in that area are involved in some type of dispense, whether it's beer, soda, liquor dispense. Like, it's crazy. So it's kind of a microcosm for inventive people in the space. And so because my dad was in the business, I used to run service with him on the weekends. My uncle was in the business, my cousins, my brother, my husband. And so I really took for granted so many things that I was learning along the way. And then as I got older, in high school and college, I started routing my dad's technicians. He had about 26 line cleaning techs that covered, gosh, I think we serviced something like 3,000 accounts in southeastern Michigan. Yeah. And let me tell you, that's where I really got my street cred and learned what the personality profile of the technicians are. And some of them are still, one of them is married to my best friend since the 3rd grade. So, like, I love these people. And it was a great learning ground. And I think, everyone talks about Detroit being tough. We have a lot of grit and we have a lot of know-how. And most of my relatives moved there and they were working at auto factories and things like that. So people were very inventive and creative with their hands and their minds. And so I took all of those things completely for granted. And I did not realize that the people I was surrounded by were really smart. I just knew that, I loved them and I wanted to be around them. And so just simply by osmosis, there were so many things that I picked up along the way. And then later, as I started working, full time in my family's business in the back office, I realized what a heavy load the job was. I mean, it is hard work managing routes, managing technicians, managing installations. And there were times where I just couldn't believe how hard it was. And so I think that inspired a lot of my brain power, whatever there is of that over the years, to go towards making the process easier for the people involved in it. And so that's kind of how I got into, the different phases, whether it was chemicals, whether it was software, and those early experiences definitely shaped my later thought processes on things that I thought would drive the industry forward, if that makes sense.
Amazing. So I was gonna ask you, how did your family legacy basically um, differentiate your approach to business and entrepreneurship? Can you please talk a little bit more about that? So starting from such a young age, seeing your
Yeah.
father, your family members doing this, but also you're a woman. So I just wanted to see to know, how did that change your mindset on business and your approach to entrepreneurship in general?
Well, I think starting way back, my grandfather who came over from Lebanon had like a wholesale business. And so I think Lebanese people just inherently are entrepreneurs and we love people. And so my cousin Janice and I are very much like that. My dad, that apple didn't fall far from the tree, as we say. So I think there's just like this innate love of working with people and also being productive in whatever it is that we do. And then I think too, seeing, I never, and I still don't think that I do differentiate between somebody that I'm serving as my customer. I don't differentiate that person from my friends. I treat them the same way. I want to always make sure that everyone is having a good experience. Like everybody has my cell phone, every technician. And so if there's ever, anything wrong, wow, it lights up like a Christmas tree. So I think that seeing my dad and also my mom, who always worked in the business, doing little things like recycling
Mhm.
bolts and like fittings and like cleaning those, and like you're never above anything that needs to be done within the business. And I think that goes back to, that Detroit mentality. But all of those little experiences, seeing the boss doing the most menial task around, whatever needed to be done, I'm sure, I don't think about it often, but I'm sure that that instilled many, many things about the way I operate today. So I would say it had just a massively tremendous impact that I will never fully be able to articulate. But I had two very hardworking parents, and they taught me all sorts of things that ended up applying to my life's calling. So I guess that worked out pretty well for me, didn't it?
For sure.
Yeah.
I completely understand you, because I also have two very, very hardworking parents, and they also always took me to work with them. So after
Yeah.
school, I would go to work with them on Saturdays, Sundays. My dad would say, "Let's go to work together." Sometimes I would go to certain business meetings where he could take his kid inside or whatever. He just wanted he wanted to show me how work life is and how life in general is, and that really did teach me a lot of things. In the beginning, I thought it wouldn't teach me anything, and actually, I would cry about having to wake up early on Saturdays. But now, I honestly am so thankful to both of them for everything they've done when I was a kid, because I think it really has a very important. It's a very important factor when you start things as a child, and I think it's one of the reasons why you were so successful as well in the job that you do, because you saw it from your parents as well, just like you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, I have a funny story about crying at work, if that's okay. I'll tell
Of
you.
course, of course.
So, I think number one, you made me think of the fact that I don't think we value hard work enough anymore as a society. We look at the Instagrammers and all that, and that seems so glamorous, but we only see this one little piece, right? And so I think just as a culture in the US, we do not value the tried and true day in, day out man in the van going to work every day, or woman in the van providing for their family. And that's, I think is unfortunate, but we certainly over at Draftline try to nurture that mentality. Everything we do is to support our technicians and raise the level of respect for the technicians within the organizations that they work for. So for me, that's hugely important. And my dad was a technician for many, many years, still is, still is. And but you made me think of a story when we were still in Detroit off of 8 Mile, at my dad's shop. I remember the first week that I went in full time. And so this is like not, I think it was like 7 to 3 that I worked because I was early. And of course, the technicians needed to be out and routed and all that kind of stuff. So the first week I did that, by the time I got to the end of the week, I was maybe 19 years old. And I went out to my car and I cried. And I was like, "Oh, this is so depressing. I just can't believe people do this their whole life." So my mom comes up, taps on my car window. And of course, back then, I'm so old, it was a crank window, right? We didn't have electric windows. And she goes, "What is wrong with you?" And I said, "People do this their whole life? You've got to be kidding me. This is what people do." And so then fast forward 30 years later, I'm doing it with thousands of people. And so I find that that is kind of hysterical, but you look back at those moments and you say, "Oh my gosh, like I thought this was the worst thing that anybody could ever do." And so now I've spent the rest of my life trying to figure out how to make it easier for other people. So you never know.
You never know.
That was a good one. Yeah.
It's a very funny story,
My
actually.
mom thought it was pretty funny at the time too.
My mom and my dad still remind me of the times where I used to cry because they would make me go to work on Saturdays, and they're like, "Are you thankful now?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I am."
Yes,
But as a kid, what do you know, right? And I actually used to
not
cry.
much.
Do you do this every day? Because sometimes, like,
Yes.
I was doing this when I was 7 or 8 years old, by the way. And every time I would be like, every Saturday, every
Yes.
single like,
Yes.
yep. Don't you
Yes.
get bored?
Yeah, you can't believe it. You're like, "This is I've got 60 years of this to look forward to.
Exactly.
Here I am. Anybody can overcome." But, too, you try and find the joy, and if you're working at improving the process,
Yes.
it makes it better, and you find those people to surround you and work with you to hopefully improve the lives of others in the process too. So that's
Exactly.
really been, the joy of what I've been able to do.
For sure. And talking about growth, as the queen of beer, because you are known as the.
Yes.
So I read a few articles, and everyone calls it the queen of beer. And I have no questions as to why that that they call you that. But as the queen of beer, how do you continuously drive innovation and growth in the beverage industry or in the company in Draftline Technologies?
Well, I think that that's exactly what we were just touching on. I
Yeah.
Because I was that person in the car off of 8 Mile crying, I'm always putting myself in the shoes of the user. And I think the Queen of Beer moniker, started kind of as a joke because everybody said it to me in the beginning. They're like, this is never going to work, Jen. It's never, no way." And I
Really?
was thinking to oh, yeah. And they were really important no's early on. My dad, I think my dad told me it was the dumbest idea he ever heard, which was great because then I was immediately like, well, now if he thinks this is dumb, I have to do it, right? But and also some of our great partners over at Micromatic, I recall John
Oh,
Solar telling me, "No, this is never going to happen." But funny enough about those guys, they became some of my number one advocates later when they realized that I could get it together and I could get it over the hump. And so anything that I needed, they're there. So when you come up with an idea, I think that it's important for people that you trust to be able to say that, to challenge that idea. And I am an expert at surrounding myself with people, including my husband, Drew, that challenge those ideas. And like I said, my family, I just thought I loved them, but they were really, really smart, whether it was my real family or my work family. And so that was a lesson to me that I had to come forward with a clear, concise way of wanting to drive innovation. I had to come up with a way that was going to work within the current framework if I wanted to try and change the paradigm of what was happening. Because, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, draft is not the most innovative sector. What you guys have done at Pabino's, awesome. I think it's great. And it's something that really is driving quality as well, which I think is our number one problem in draft. But I think just always putting myself in the shoes of the user, whether it's a technician, always in the early days, that's what it was, a draft manager for how they need to look at the information so they can be as efficient and drive as much efficiency within the routing that they're utilizing. That's huge. We have merchandisers, we have sales reps, we now work with business analysts trying to look at the data. And so I think that probably being a female helps that because I'm kind of an empath, like I'm sensitive to what other people need as a mom and just as a person. And I think that that is the number one thing that has helped drive the different innovations we've come up with, whether it was the mobile applications, updates and innovations on the chemicals, or whether it was even collecting the data. That was a surprise. Like we didn't think in the early days. I literally was sitting on the couch 8 months pregnant, and I had this idea that we should come up with a mobile application. And
Mhm.
everyone's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, we need a mobile app to track this process. That was probably about 2009 where I originally had the idea. I think I had just gotten my first cell phone. And so what ended up happening is that took off like wildfire, wasn't anticipating it. And then we were just collecting so much data. I really thought that I would find somebody smarter and more well equipped to take that data and format it back out to whoever needed to see it. And then I realized because nobody had ever collected the data that we tracked before, which is basically, for anybody that doesn't know, it's information that has to do with the accounts. We track the beer systems, what
Mm.
type, how many stations, how many towers, how many faucets. We track the brands that we're servicing, the distributors and the breweries and the categories and all sorts of things related to that. So nobody had ever tracked the data at the scale that we had, and so therefore nobody knew what to do with it. And so that's kind of been my journey for the last 3 years, is to figure out what views we can bring to the market, ultimately to drive efficiencies, which means saving money, and then also drive sales in the on-premise for the brands and the locations that we're servicing so we can grow the market.
That's
So
amazing. Yeah, so you mentioned so many things, but I want to continue the conversation on the data part as well a little bit more because at Pabino we're doing the same thing. We have an app as well called the Smart Hub, which gives you the data from the Smart Tap and the Smart Clean. For the Smart Tap, it tells you the temperature, the average temperature of the beer you're pouring, how many pints you've poured a day, the week before, the month before, which brand you sold the most, and also the average quality of the beer that you're pouring. In this way, you
yes,
know what you're selling the most, what makes you most money. But the thing that made the biggest difference when it comes to increasing sales, when it comes to also saving money, was so simple. By the way, on the Smart Tab, you can see how much of beer you have left on your keg. So just like you
yeah,
see how much beer you have left on your iPhone, you see that. And that, for example, was like a game changer for a lot of bars and restaurants because they could never know how much beer there was left on the keg. So they'll just say, I think it's almost done, so let's just change it. Or I think rush hour is coming, let's get a new one. But with a smart app, it doesn't happen anymore. So that saved the money. When it
right.
comes to increasing sales, they now know which brand they're selling the most. So they know what to order for the next week or for the next month. So data is so important, but it's such a shame because you still need to convince the beverage industry that data is important. Not
Yeah.
every, of course, they started to change that a bit more, especially in the past 2 years or the past year. But it's still very difficult to convince the bar owner or the restaurant owner that hey, the data is important. Actually, it will make you more money. So I was just wondering, how do you guys do it on your side?
Well, this is the big difference between what Draftline does and what a Pabino would do. We don't work directly with the retail locations.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of experience doing that. And my dad used to own a company, my mom and my dad, Chuck and Louise Thomas, they owned a company called Berg Liquor Controls.
Okay.
And so this is years ago, and they had flow metering systems, the old style. They had portioning control for liquor and guns and all that kind of stuff. And so one of the biggest challenges with working with a retail location is making sure that you have an engaged operator that is looking at and caring about what kind of yield they can get out of a keg because they have these meters. And it, for an individual location, it is a game changer if you have somebody who's engaged in that process, because you're driving revenue, you're saving money, everybody's happy. And that was one of the biggest challenges my dad had in his company up in Detroit, was that anytime that manager would leave or change, you've got to go re-engage again and you have to retrain. And so for us at Draftline, I realized that I probably didn't want to do that because we had
Mhm.
experienced that for a number of years, and you guys know exactly how that is. And so the approach I decided to take, we called the service center model. So when we went in, we were going to track companies that were servicing hundreds or even thousands of accounts. And
Okay.
that's how our numbers grew so fast. So we're not doing this through sensors, it's through manual human input. And of course, kegs don't have any barcodes typically.
Yeah.
And so you need a person to actually input that data. And that was really the innovation that I realized, hey, all my technicians back in Detroit, they never left their cell phone because, you know, they were worried about their friends calling. I don't know if they were worried about me calling with service calls, but I knew they always had that phone attached. And so I knew that if we could come up with something that was light and easy for them to use, we could track that
Mhm.
way. But this to me is the crux of the struggle for how we will apply data to the on premise. For a system like Pabino, it's uh, incredibly efficient and transformative if that location is using it and they're engaged with the data. Same thing with Draftline, even though it's not the location itself, it's the beer
Mm.
distributor or the third party service company using our applications to go out and track. That's kind of like the quest. How do you keep them engaged? And typically the way you keep them engaged is, I don't know if I should say this, you're making them more money or you're saving them money. And that's what keeps them interested. And
Yeah.
so some things that might be important to me are not so important to the end users. And so that's where it becomes a big deal about putting yourself in the position of those end users and how they're going to use the data, and always driving optimization on seeing things that, or displaying things, I should say, that they want to see. Really important.
Sure. Like making them more money is really the answer. You said I don't know if I should say it, but it's the truth. It's a reality. So as long as you're giving them something in return, which will of course impact their business for the best, they're gonna love you
Right.
more, right?
Yes.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. Well, and it also drives, I'm a capitalist, obviously, as I sit here in Orlando, Florida. I think that if we're driving the health of the restaurant industry and the brewing industry and driving health all along that supply chain, that means everybody has to make a profit, right, at every point. And so I think that's a good thing, and that's what helps us carry on, and that's what helps drive innovation, because you have funds to put back into the businesses to come up with these cool things that will make the draft industry better.
Exactly. I actually have a perfect example for the what you said, like increased sales, or if they earn more money, they're gonna love you more. They're gonna keep using your product as well. So for the smart cleaner, our third product, a few bars started using it last year, and we did this study, and then we noticed that actually the bars noticed that they were selling more draft beer after it started using the smart clean, because the lines were cleaner, so that the
Yeah.
quality of the draft beer was higher. In the beginning, they were, because we kept telling them that this is going to happen, this is going to happen. They're like, no, no, but okay, let's just use it, because they have been Pabino users for many years now, smart app users, and they love the smart app. So they started using the smart clean as well, and then they noticed an increase in sales and also customer satisfaction. And that's when they realized, oh, okay, so cleaner lines does actually mean more sales
Increased sales.
and more money for
Yes.
them.
Yes. And so, Enki, I don't know if you want to pull it up, but that relates perfectly to that graph. And
Yes.
so this is everything that we preach as we go through. and talk to people about draft quality. And so on this
This,
graph, yes. And so for anybody that is not familiar with the Brewers Association guidelines, and when I do travel internationally, a lot of people don't know about it. So we have this wonderful document that every major brewer in the US got together and signed off on. And it was for the best quality practices that we should espouse here in the US. This is what we should be telling people to do because it just makes the beer taste better. And for every bad experience somebody has, it takes 12 good experiences to make up for that. And so for all the people here that are engaged in draft, and I can't remember where I got that from. I think it was like some study by Nielsen or something. I can find out. But long story short, you don't want to have to work that hard 12 times to win somebody back. We want to maintain and make sure every single time that our customers are enjoying beer as the brewer intended. And so on this graph, what this shows is you go in, you do everything right. So day one is the first day after the line cleaning. So this is making the assumption that you're following what we call the center circle or the law of mass cleaning. You're spending the proper amount of time, the proper amount of chemical concentration, and for the BA, it's 2 to 3% sodium hydroxide by weight. And that's a whole other discussion that we probably won't get in today, but if anybody has any questions on that, let me know. So time, concentration, action. And lots of times you can't recirc. I know in Europe, I think on the Pabino machine, you guys have some type of mechanical flow for the cleaning chemical that I've seen on that, which just that improves the quality by 80%.
exactly.
80%. All of these factors, time, concentration, action, and temperature being equal, that is such an easy thing to do. So here in the US, we have recirc pumps, and I actually had redesigned one, sold the idea to Micromatic, and that was the seed money for Draftline that I started with, believe it or not. But anyway, on this chart, day one, we clean, the bacteria is at a very low level. And here in the US, we have unpasteurized beer, so it's liquid bread. There's a lot of bacteria in it. And if you go, you see that by day 2 and 3, it's steadily that bacteria count starts to spike. We know this is going to happen. The bacteria is inherent in beer. For anybody that doesn't know, Pediococcus, Pectinatus, Acetobacter, I'm forgetting one, but it's in there and it's going to grow, and that's the way it is. So by day 14, you've got to clean again to make sure that that bacteria does not colonize to a level that causes off taste in the beer. So this is where we say 14-day cycle, friends. If you're cleaning every 2 weeks, you're going to have optimal quality with the bacteria, which we know will be there, not causing an off taste. If you wait till the end of the month, you see it more than doubles. And so this is the constant struggle that we're trying to avoid with chemical products, with going in and cleaning. And we have best practices that are well established, that are pretty simple, but everything Draftline does is to make sure that we're ensuring that 2-week cycle is happening with the right amount of chemical. So I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but there we are.
I think what you just explained is something that a lot of people need to hear because they don't know. They don't know this. The last PBT I did, Perfect Beer Talks webinar, was with Dr. Stefan. He's also, I think you saw the webinar. He said that he would rinse his lines once a day, and he would clean them.
Yeah.
Detergent every 2 weeks, which I think is how it's supposed to be done. In Japan, for example, they clean them every day. So we work with Asahi in Japan, and they love the Smart Clean because of this reason, because they do the cleaning every day. And there's a difference in culture. There's a difference in perception between Europe, Asia, and America as well. Like in America, in New York City, for example, we talk with a few bars and they're like, oh, I am very diligent with my line cleaning. I clean it every month. And we're like, no.
I know.
That's not how it's done. Unfortunately, people still don't know. And they don't know
Yeah.
the difference that it will make by just cleaning your lines more often. And of course,
Right.
cleaning them properly as well, because it's not just about cleaning, right? It's
Right.
about,
Well,
yeah.
Exactly, and that's the thing. You're taking the time to send somebody there to go through the process. You want to make sure that you're hitting all of those points, the concentration, the soak time, and
Yes.
that is all integral to the process. And so that, I don't love people knowing everything that I'm up to. I don't like always doing podcasts. I've gotten more comfortable with speaking in front of crowds over the last 2 years because I kind of got nominated. There was nobody else that was remotely interested in speaking in front of crowds about this exact message. And so that education piece that you talk about is the biggest problem that we have, and it's the biggest impediment to the quality of beer. And so in the US, if you don't know, which many people I'm sure don't know, in 38 states, it's the responsibility of the beer wholesaler to go out and clean lines every 2 weeks, and that's mandated by their suppliers. So, for example, Anheuser-Busch, Molson Coors, New Belgium Brewing. And in 12 states, it is the retailer's responsibility, so the pub owner. And that I'm anticipating in some of these markets, that's what you're dealing with. So here we
Yes.
have a 3-tier system: the supplier, the distributor, the retailer. Overseas, all of our friends in Europe, they have a 2-tier system where it's the brewery supplier and the retailer, and the relationship is closer with the brewery supplier in those instances. And so therefore, because you have one less layer, in some cases it's more organized and more methodical. In others, I'm sure maybe not. But that's part of the challenge about the US. And also, in the US, we have a lot of beer systems that are what I'm going to call legacy systems. I hate to say some
Mhm.
of them are almost a half a century old, like me, out there still operating. And they're probably past their expiration date, which some people would say I am as well, but that's too bad. So then, you've got to make sure that you're updating and cleaning those systems sometimes a little more often, and once a month would not do it. So
Right.
it's that education piece is a big problem. That's why it's great that you do talks like this.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we do this, to educate people. It's actually one of the biggest reasons why we do this. It's not, of course, I love talking to people like you, and there's so many. I've interviewed so many experts, but the part where we had the opportunity to educate so many people on how to basically make draft beer better.
Yeah.
That's that's the whole point of what we're doing at Pabino, and also what you're doing at Draftline Technologies as well. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk with you about basically draft beer consumption decreasing over the past years.
Yeah. This is a tough one. Lots of statistics online that have not been so kind to our business, right?
Right? So why do you think this is happening? What can we do about it?
Well, I think the number one thing that we can do is make sure those lines are cleaned.
Right.
Because if we don't have a good experience at that on-premise location, people aren't going to come back for more. I talked about the 12 times. You need 12 more good experiences to make up for the one bad experience. I think in many instances, there's a mentality of, well, if I wait a month, it's not going to affect me that much. So, one of the big things that I've been working on is gathering these case studies to show the profitability, the impact of line cleaning on that profitability. And that is difficult. Like in your case, you have to have these conversations with every single person that you're working with. For me, I've chosen to try and work through the network that we have here in the US with the NBWA, the Alliance with for Women in Beer, and get the message out that way, because some insiders don't even understand why we're doing what we're doing. So I think making sure that we're maintaining quality at the point of dispense through that 2-week line cleaning cycle is absolutely vital. And the other thing that surprises me that we don't talk about, because we talked about this, I have 3 kids, one's
Mhm.
past drinking age at this point. We say that we're an environmentally conscious society, but we don't talk about the environmental profile of draft beverages, and not just beer. And I'm like, okay, for the coffee pod generation, please, would you think about draft beer? My husband and I, because we are old, we still drink out of the carafe, not the pod, because that's just the way we did it forever We were alive before cell phones and Keurigs. Not that I don't love those too. We have one at the office. But um, I actually, when I was up to see my daughter in New York, I asked a couple of her friends, "Do you ever drink draft beer?" And they go, "No, I never think of it. I always just think of getting a package." And one of the things another thing that we don't stress enough about draft is there's a theater to the presentation. It's an experience. It's an experience that is meant to be shared. And so Kian Hickey, one of my dear friends who's, I don't know what his title is now. I think he's CEO of Micromatic in the US. I asked him 20 years ago, I said, "Why do we have glass washers?" And he said, "The theater, Jennifer, the theater." Like, it's the presentation. This is something you don't get at home. And so we as an industry have to be collectively working to preserve that history, to make sure that draft stays relevant, and that when somebody gets that beer, it's got the right head on it. We're pouring out of a glass that is not cleaned with a petroleum-based sanitizer. That the system, to Pabino's concern, is temperature is right, the pressure is right, because if any one of those things goes out of whack, it's not going to be the most wonderful experience that it could be. And so I think that draft has so many things that are relevant today. The average lifespan of a keg is 30 years. My mentor, Peter Mozanegro, wrote a great article on that. I'll make sure I send that to you. And
Please.
what other package does that? None that I can think of. And so we don't talk about it enough. There's a great association in the US that's new, I think new since COVID, called the Steel Keg Association. And so they're out there trying to push that message. But I don't know. I think we need some rock stars talking about draft beer. I think we saw Messi on one of the
Yes.
beer commercials for. So we need more of that, because I think he got a draft beer before he went off on his soccer footwork or
We
football,
just,
whatever.
we just talked about this in the office today about the
Yeah.
commercial. Yeah.
Yeah, so good. So I think that, and also we need to nurture our technicians and our draft managers and give them the proper tools to do the job. And in order to do that, one of the most impactful things for me has been showing that um, a job that is very unglamorous. Okay. So we're
Mhm.
going in and we're cleaning beer lines. We're basically the janitors of the brewing industry. It's not, sometimes it doesn't smell so good. Sometimes, we get beer sprayed everywhere. It's not that fun. But showing that that crew can go in and collect data that can be transformative. And to your point, we did a case study last year. Just with one distributor, their volume went up by 15%. Some of that is cleaning, some of that is targeting the right beer or the right, you know, cocktail on tap in the right place at the right time. So it's early days on that data, but I think, the studies will show and will convince people, and it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy because it can fund itself moving forward. So I think, I don't know where we started with that question, Enki, but I'm
Yes.
riffing. Sorry.
Clean lines. No, I can just summarize it for you. Clean lines, which we talked so much about, draft line technologies, Babino Smart Clean. Like this is what we're working for every day. Data, again, your app, Smart Hubs app. Sustainability. By the way, we do have an environmental report from Pabino. You can go ahead. I'll send it to you after this
I
webinar.
think I read it. I think
Yeah.
you released it on Earth Day,
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly. We released it on Earth Day. So we do a lot of work on sustainability, and the environmental impact basically shows the difference that kegs and bottled beer has, on the environment, saving water, saving CO2 emission. There's so much going on that nobody really thinks about. And at least for my generation, we always talk about sustainability. We always try to say, I'm drinking the oat milk because I'm trying to be more environmentally friendly, but nobody actually knows what is more environmentally friendly to
Right.
begin with correctly. They just hear something on Instagram or they just hear something on YouTube and they just say, oh, okay, let's do that. But if people do some research, they will actually see the difference that keg and bottled beer does. Oh, just a few weeks ago, there was a bottled beer found on the deepest point of the earth. Did you see that on the
No.
Mariana Point? I think the Mariana Point. Yeah. So we wrote a blog post about it. I'll send it to you. I wrote a blog post
Yeah.
about it. It's so interesting. So a bottled beer was found on the deepest point of the earth. That just shows the impact that bottled beer has on the environment. And I think
Yeah.
people just understand at this point that cake does not only taste better. By the way, you were trying to explain what, like, the how much better it is to drink beer from the bar. I always say that it's an art. So a bartender, he does art
Yes.
when he pours a pint, when he does a cocktail, it's a form of art. And I think, at least for the smart tap, what our CEO always says is, because we had a lot of misconception from people thinking that we're trying to basically substitute a bartender with a smart
I
tap, which was
see. No.
completely not the case. So he was trying to explain it in this way. He was like, no guys, I'm trying to give you a tool that will make the draft beer part perfect for you and will allow you to basically do your art in a much better way and in a much more calmer way. So that's what we're doing. And you mentioned sustainability, and then you also, what else did you mention? I
So many
uh,
things. I don't know. But
all of that up to the point. Perfect.
well,
Yeah.
but you made me think of too, one of the things that I came into um, contact with my team in the early days when there were things that I wanted to automate. There, because we're people, we fear change, right? And so this is probably, I've got two superpowers. One is God always sends me the right person at the right time, no matter where I am, which is wonderful. And the other thing is I can understand the fear in people trying to ask them to change and create a new mode of behavior. And
Yes.
so there's a resistance to that. So whether it's a self-pour system, whether it's the Pabino system, people are nervous about, well, how does that impact me? How's that going to impact
Yeah.
my job? But I think one of the great things about draft, which you highlighted, is we have this incredible speed of service. And I think it was Micromatic in Germany did a little video last week, and
Mhm.
it was how many cocktails could you pour out of one of these
Yeah.
draft systems as opposed to mixing? And the guy who was pouring the craft cocktails out of the keg was so much faster. And one of the things that we have a problem here within the US is enough staff at the locations. I mean, we live in a wonderful little town called Winter Park, and down from the office, we have lots of restaurants. And sometimes they can't sit people because the staff hasn't showed up for whatever
Mhm.
reason. This has been a phenomenon since COVID. And of course, they have a draft system in there, which is great because it's something that helps that location speed up their rate of service. And they could
Yeah.
still put their own spin on that cocktail. Come
Yeah.
on, you know, just speeds it up a little bit. Yeah. But I think when it comes to sustainability, and I call it kind of the single serve lifestyle that our kids have been raised on. I mean, my husband
Mhm.
and I remember there was no bottled water. He thinks that that's the biggest joke ever because we used to not have to have bottles for everything. We used to use cups and we used
Okay.
to use drinking fountains. And so you didn't have to buy. I mean, somebody's paying for the water ultimately, I'm sure, but you didn't have to go out and buy like cases of water like we do now. And he's like, this is terrible because it's just not good for the environment. So
Right.
but it's also something that we have to bring up and suggest to people who are of age to enjoy those draft beverages to maybe make a different choice.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
my next question is directly related to sustainability. So I was going to ask, given your experience, how do you see the future of draft industry, particularly in the terms of sustainability and environmental considerations? So till now, we know what we have done wrong, and we know what we should change. But how do you think draft beer industry is going to look like in the next 10 years when it comes to their sustainability efforts?
Well, when it comes to sustainability, I think the breweries overall have done a really great effort with cutting down on the amount of water they're using, recapturing caustic, topping it off, and they're using that to clean in-house, in the brew house. I think that's been pretty amazing. I think I hope that draft beer again, the more efficient those systems are pouring, the more yield that's coming out of those kegs. I think sensors will end up helping that over time. But I think we're already pretty sustainable as an industry. It's just we've got to get more people engaged in enjoying it. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Perfect. I couldn't,
yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
never actually thought in that way. I always thought we have to do something different. But to be fair, everything exists already.
yeah.
So the most sustainable version is here. Is the most traditional one, actually, is the cake part. It's just
Which
that
is
people.
ironic, is it not? I mean, it is. People, have been drinking beer for what, 20,000 years, I think, since the time of the Egyptians. And so maybe before, I don't know.
Yeah,
Um,
they started in Mesopotamia. Women actually were the first, were the ones who invented beer.
of course we were. Of
Yeah.
course we were. But, you look at that and you say sometimes the old way is the better way. Um, but I think too that there will be many efficiencies to be gained, not so much on the well, maybe a little bit on the sustainability side. When we look at
Mhm.
how we're going to apply data to the brands that we want to place. And so right now, I actually just went on my first on-premise sales call about a month ago I think it was in Montana. And so I never saw, and I love going on site. I'm always doing line cleanings wherever I go with the crew. But the sales calls with the sales reps is kind of a new thing for us because we're figuring out how to use the data to sell more beer. And I didn't realize how much emotion was tied up in what people were choosing to put on their beer faucets. I thought
Okay.
it was more of a scientific approach, but it's like, oh, that one's fruity. I like it. Okay, we'll
Oh,
order that. Or, oh, I like this. And so I was like, oh my gosh. So I think um, we're going to kind of suck some of the efficiencies out of the market as they stand, take some of the emotion out, very
mhm.
targeted go in, place product on systems where we have some data behind the fact that we know it's going to sell. And hopefully that's going to increase the rate of sale at all those locations as well. I think that will be something that's coming.
I'm very excited to see how that's going to work out. So I was actually going to ask you. So sorry, you were scared you were gonna
Okay.
cough
I
live, but
know, now
I'm
it's you.
so with technologies tracking over 1 million draft lines in 40 states. What strategies do you employ to ensure scalability and reliability on the service that you provide?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is our cloud support team. So when I came up with the idea for Draftline, I thought, surely, just like today, everyone will be glued to their computer screen. They'll want to be watching the technicians all day long. No, nobody has gotten more time. Everyone has more duties. They have less and less time. So I would say it was probably about 2 or 3 years into the inception of Draftline that I realized I was going to need a team that could replicate what I could do back in
Mhm.
Detroit for my dad's business, but we would do it for many businesses. So we touch about 800, just over 800 distributors and service companies, and we have this wonderful cloud support team. Some in Macedonia, like we talked about, some here in Orlando, some in Texas. And so we cover all these different time zones from Europe to Hawaii, and they are helping the technicians, helping the managers pull reports and do all sorts of things that these users can't do on the fly. And so I
Mhm.
think that has been the number one strategy for helping us be scalable. Because if somebody doesn't show up for work that day to pull a report, you can still get it from the cloud support team at Draftline. And that's a big thing. The other big thing that we started doing maybe 3 years ago is our end of year reviews with every single customer. And let me tell you, it takes me 3 months. It takes me 3 months to go through. And sometimes people look at me and they're like, how many meetings do you have in a day? Sometimes it's 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I
Oh,
have a team that helps me prep all the decks. I have a set deck that I go through with everybody, but it's their own data. And I cannot tell you how that has transformed how the companies that we work with view their line cleaning programs. It's been incredible. So for me, the scalability was there at inception because it was a cloud-based platform. It was
Mhm.
mobile applications for the technicians, a web interface for the managers, but installing the cloud support team along with the regular follow-ups, that's been the thing that's really kept adoption. So no leaky buckets for us. We want to make sure that we don't leave anybody behind.
For sure. Yeah, that's amazing. And so you mentioned how you do the meetings with every single customer that you have. And I think that also had like the fact that not that because you're a woman, exactly 100%, but I think is that empathetic part of being a woman that actually made you, I think about this detail, because I don't think a lot of people will do what you're doing, by the way. It takes a lot of
Yeah.
time, a lot of effort, 3 months meetings back to back from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. to basically hear what people have to say on the job that you do is a lot of effort. And I think exactly what I was saying, it's just the empathetic part of being a woman that I think has,
Yeah.
done, like, has it helped to have that connection with your customers as well. And talking about women in the beverage industry, draft industry, you do a lot, not only with the work that you do, but you do a lot for women and women in the beverage industry and draft industry as well. So what specific initiatives or programs do you believe are essential for fostering greater gender diversity and inclusion within the industry we are in?
Yeah, well, I would say I always think I get more back than I give. Number one, there are so many people. I even had messages today before the session started. I think it was Emma from the UK. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I want to connect with you. Good luck today." I again, the superpower of just everybody being a cheerleader. So, for what we do by sponsoring the Alliance for Women in Beer and other sessions throughout the year for that, I think I get so much more back. So, I have a now friend, Kim McKinnish, who's the CFO for the National Beer and Beverage Wholesalers Association, who I just called up out of the blue a couple of years ago. And I said, I see that you have an association for women in beer. Is there something I can do? And she said, I can't believe you're calling me. I listened to a podcast you were on yesterday and I wrote down, I need to call Jennifer Hawk. And there it was. So it was like Kismet. And so we sponsor this annual get together, which is basically it's a tag on to the annual convention that the NBWA has, and it's a whole day women supporting women in beer and beverage. And we bring in all different types of speakers to cover issues that are very specific to women in beer and just women that have careers that are demanding. And it's a wonderful day where you get to meet a lot of people that otherwise you probably would not because of the small nature. I think it was like 850 people on the
Yeah.
last gathering. And so that's one way. Draftline itself has been an almost all female crew for many years. That was
Yes.
not my plan. It just happened that way. And so we have these amazing ladies, Rebecca, who's my right hand, and Petra, who's my left hand. Like, I could not do it without them. And, just hardworking people that are females in this industry. And not to ignore the guys because they have been a huge support. My husband,
Yeah.
obviously my number one fan, Drew. Um, all of them have recognized that, Draftline's going out there with a message that a lot of people don't know about, which is cleaning beer lines. A lot of people don't know that that needs to happen. And so maybe to have a female stepping out and speaking about that gets a little bit more attention than it would one of the guys. So I think supporting women in beer. And I remember when I did that first conference, um, we were sponsoring as Draftline, and the person who spoke in front of me was somebody who's like a person that teaches professionals how to present themselves. And it was the first time I had spoken in front of a big crowd, and I
Wow.
wanted to die. So I got up on the stage and I realized that the only chance I had was to be myself. And so there's like hundreds of women in the crowd. And I just said, where the hell have you all been? I have not seen any of you. And so I'm glad you're here today because there's more than you think and it's growing all the time. And so I think of that. I think of, Maggie Timoney from Heineken, who's the CEO over there. I think Molson Coors in Canada just got a female CEO yesterday appointed. And then I have another dear colleague, Jen Litzkirk, who works at Beer Business Daily. She's another one that kind of pushed me out there to get our message out. So again, helping me craft my message to make it relative and relatable to the people that we're trying to serve. Females have just been incredibly important in the development of Draftline and helping us grow and get our message out. So I think anybody who's been a part of those Alliance for Women in Beer conferences would agree. So you'll have to come to that next year,
Okay,
Enki,
I would love to.
in the
It'll be a
fall. In the fall, yes,
for sure. It'll be a pleasure. I actually put the link of the Alliance for Women in Beer so that everyone can check it. I think I spent like around 2 hours checking the website. By the way, what you're doing is amazing, and I knew that there was over 800 women because I saw it on the website and I saw the videos and I saw it looks amazing. And the women, the roles
yeah,
they are in, the work they have done, their experience, just amazing, and it's so motivating for me as well. And I think it's the same for a lot of women out there who want to be in the beverage industry or just any other industry, because most industries are male dominant industries. So I think it's not just about the beverage industry, but it's just about business life in general, where
yeah,
women just have to, I think, shine brighter in general.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that comes back to the little queen of beer moniker, kind of everybody laughing here, calling me that. But to make something of it. And I think too, when you see somebody that you can relate to and they're in a position where, they founded a company, and I don't ever wake up in the morning and think, gosh, look at all the great things I've done. Never, ever, ever has that happened to me. I think like, oh my gosh, I have so far to go, right?
Yeah,
But when I think about my daughters and what I want them to achieve, even though, mom has to spend a lot of hours away and traveling, I get a lot of joy out of my career. And I hope that for younger people that see me out there living my dream in draft beer, if you can believe it, that it's inspiring. I hope it inspires them to, kind of pick up their torch in whatever career they want. And so for me, I realize that most industries are male dominated. I think, for draft lines, I think you and I are a case of showing that that's changing.
yeah.
But I I have found that if you ask anybody for help, they will help you. And so I don't see any doors that are closed if you have enough grit to kind of push through it. So we're at that point in the world, and I think that's a good thing for young people coming behind.
I completely agree with you for sure. Now, you mentioned Emma before, Emma Stewart,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
She is watching us, by the way. She left a comment a while ago.
Hello,
She-
Emma. Yeah. And so funny enough, she said she's going to Detroit to visit Abaco, which I grew up right down the street from that company. They're a parts and pieces manufacturer in Detroit. So I was like, tell the test stories. I said hello. They'll know me as Chuck Thomas's daughter.
That's
Small
amazing.
world. Small world.
Talking again about women, but this time I'll also include a bit of your personal life. So you're a business woman, you're a leader. She says hi, Jen, by the way.
Hi, Emma.
I'm showing.
I love it.
So you're a mother, you are a wife, you are a daughter, you are a friend, you are
Yes.
your own human being. So before we started the webinar, you said there is no balance.
No.
I was going to ask, how do you balance the role? But you said there is no balance. Can you just please tell me a little bit more of how there is no balance, and
Yeah.
how did you make it?
Yeah. I think, and I have had kids over a long number of years, right? So I started in 2000 and then I think I ended in 2012. So there's 12 years between my kids. Same dad. Everybody gets surprised. And my oldest daughter always says, I wish people would realize I was here first. They think it's different marriages or something, but no. And so through all those years, we were building our businesses. That's why it took us so many years to have more kids. And I think that, to say, oh, I'm going to have this work life balance is a total lie. I think that there is no work life balance. I think that it's totally key. I have a wonderful partner in all things, Drew. And so, we have had to shift roles over different parts of our marriage. We've been married, I think it'll be 26 years coming up, which is kind of scary. And you have to hopefully have a support system that can fill the gaps for you when you can't be there. And of course, my parents now live down here in Orlando. They're in the offices here today. They still work. Now they work for me. That's the difference, which is kind of hysterical. And so a lot of the roles in my life have reversed over the course of the last, quarter of a century. And so if anybody thinks they're going to go into it and they're going to have time for everything, no way. What I would say that I have learned is that I always call it little boxes in my head where I just kind of compartmentalize things for later. And the biggest thing is a trick for me, hopefully somebody will get value out of this, is when you're doing something, be all in on that one thing. So if you're at work, and of course the kids come into the office too, but be at work and be focused on that. When I go home at night and it's time to work on geometry with Charlie, it's time to do that. And it's not the time to take calls. My kids, I'm sure, wish that I took less phone calls in the car driving to and fro. However, they're always on their cell phones anyway. But it's really hard. And I think it's just adulting, as I call it, is hard. And so when you get married, if you choose to have a family, which many people, don't want to have kids anymore, which I understand, maybe they're making better life choices than I have. But I can't trade them back now. They're mine forever and I love them. And so you look at that and you say, you just have to set the expectation and just kind of try and be all in wherever you're at that moment. That's the only way to roll. And yeah, I don't know. I don't have it. I wish I had it all figured out. I could get your beer lines clean, but I can't solve all the life problems, right? So, but that's a tough one. And I think as women, we have a lot more to balance than our
True.
male counterparts do. A lot more expectations. If the gym clothes aren't cleaned in the morning, it's your fault, mom, all that kind of stuff. So it's hard. But
Exactly.
it's worth it, and it's also not forever is something I'm learning too. Like everything has its phase, and as they get older, they get more responsible for their own things. And I'm sure one day I will miss having to run back to the house to grab somebody's iPad for school.
Most probably. Funny enough, what you said is the same exact advice my dad gives to me. He's been giving that advice to me like since I was a kid. But when he said always said when you're doing something, so just like I said, when you're at work, just be at work. When you're having fun, be out having fun. Don't think about what you have to do after
Yeah.
you're done with that. Just enjoy the moment, and always have like an idea of what you want to be next or what you want to do next, but never really consummate your entire thoughts and mindset with what you want to be or who you want to be, rather than be who you want to be, who you are right now, and just work towards the person you want to be slowly. That's
Yeah.
so it's I just found it very interesting that you gave me the same advice my dad did.
Your dad's very wise. And that relates to another thing I always say to my kids, momentum. It's momentum, right? So you're not where you want to be, but just take one step every day towards where you want to get to. And that relates to me, that relates to anybody on any type of goal they have. But if you can every day gain a little bit of momentum towards where you want to get to over the long term, when you turn around and look back, you're going to be amazed at how far
Exactly.
you've gotten.
Yeah, you don't notice it on an everyday basis, but when you look back, like really back, you understand the difference that there is. Yeah, of course, for sure.
For
So
sure.
different topic now.
Okay, shifting.
Yeah, if you could have a pint with anyone in this world, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh gosh, this is a good one. And I think my answer is going to surprise you, and you probably don't know who this person is.
Okay.
So I thought about, Jesus, Napoleon Bonaparte, Johann Gutenberg, who invented the printing press. But
Yes.
I watched a documentary recently on an actress, and her name was Hedy Lamarr. And she was also an inventor,
Okay.
and she invented frequency skipping with a musician, and that was the precursor to Wi-Fi. And so I would have to say that Hedy Lamarr, being a female inventor,
Mhm.
um, and she died a couple of miles away from here.
Oh,
I looked
what?
her up, yeah, recently, Castleberry, Florida, many years ago, 1985, but somebody very intriguing. So she spent most of her life as an actress, but in her free time had a family. I don't know if you call that free time, but also in the evenings would work on her inventions. And so she ended up coming up with the precursor to Wi-Fi. So I think that brain must have been pretty amazing. So I'd like to have a pint with her.
I will definitely look her up after the webinar. I don't know who she is, but wow, what
You'll
an
recognize one of the images of her. There's a very famous one. She had dark hair and
oh,
stars.
so my team they just showed me her photo because they're on
Yeah,
the back. I know, yeah, I know the photo, of course. I
yeah,
know her. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So, my other question for you is going to be a bit more related to technology, innovation, and how technology innovation is going to change the draft industry in the next 5 to 10 years. So, how do you see? Because technology and innovation, AI, for example, has been integrated in so many industries a long time ago. Not
Hmm.
AI per se, but technology in
Right.
medicine. I don't know, so many industries. But when it comes to the draft industry or beer industry, it seems like people or like the experts or the professionals did not really like it that much, did not really want it that much. So we did that with Pabino, and in the beginning, of course, it was challenging, but it's starting to get better. I just wanted to know, where do you see it going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think I'm going to have you pull up that slide in a second on the draft super cycle. I gave a presentation in 2009. And that presentation was when I came up with the concept for Draftline. And I quoted somebody else, I can't remember who it was, that said all industries would be digitized by 2020. And so I said, we have to come up with a product that's going to digitize. It's not this one,
Wait.
that
Oh,
will
sorry.
digitize the draft industry.
Yes.
And so basically, that my solution to that was Draftline. Okay. But
Okay.
and this is a different presentation. So this is one that I had given in the fall, I think, to the Next Gen conference for the NBWA. And so to understand where we're going, this is why I wanted to show this. We got to look back a little bit. And so for a very long time, we had about 350 to 400,000 draft lines in the US. We now think we have 1.5 million in total. That's why it's kind of a big deal that we track 1 million. Okay. Cause it's like, oh my gosh. And of course, I do this through all these companies that we work with. So, what happened to get us to 1.5 million draft lines over the last, gosh, what is this? 20, 30 years is that we had the introduction of the 20-liter keg. So our refrigerators didn't get bigger, but we were able to put more variety. In 1982, we had something in the US called the craft beer craze start, and that was the first pint of beer at Sierra Nevada was brewed. So Ken Grossman, who came up with that in Chico, California. And so that really kicked off the draft beer craze. So back in the 70s, when I was born, and we just had, say 300 different breweries in the US. We now are at a point where we have, I think it's over 10,000 breweries just in the United States alone. And so we have this unprecedented variety that people can choose from. And we like that as a society, right? Everybody likes to be able to choose what they like, what flavor profile. But I think we have an overproliferation of that. I think there's too many flavors out there. So I think AI applying, and we have AI within Draftline on tracking the brands themselves. But I think the application of making better choices at the individual locations through technology, through scan data, at some point, if someone can figure out how to have clean POS data, combining that kind of with the Draftline data, figuring out how to place products that are really going to move, I think will suck a lot of the inefficiencies out. So if I look forward, I think sensors like you do at Fabino will be very, very important. I think flow meters, if we can engage the on-premise retailer, again, they're transformative for them, but it's keeping their interest. But I think as it relates to deciding what type of products we're going to put up as a variety on the draft system, I think that's really going to hone in. And I think we're going to get better at predicting what's going to sell.
Talking about prediction, my question for you was: do you think that the beer industry is more reactive or proactive as an industry?
We're not
Uh,
proactive. No. Yeah. I mean, and that's something that you fight against, right? So you go in my experience, to show people that they should change and do something different than what they're doing today, right? So everyone wants to kind of stay in homeostasis. Like, I'm fine the way I am, Jen. I don't want to do anything different. You have to show them overwhelming benefits as to
mhm.
why they should make that change, whether it's their pocketbook, whether it's their time, whatever the benefit of it is. But as an industry, we're very traditional. We're proud of that, merging what the best of what technology has to offer with the tradition of brewing. It's wonderful, but it does make for slow change. Um,
Yes.
and some things that we do are just tried and true. I don't see anything coming along to change those, but to create what I call a paradigm shift and get people doing new things that they're not doing today, I think most people will respond to logic. Not everybody. Sometimes you can't win everyone over. But
Yeah,
if
yeah.
we can give them good case studies and good reasons as to why technology will be a win for them, they'll come over to our way of thinking, I believe.
I think so as well, for sure. I have a question that most of the guests that I ask it to are like, "Oh my god, it's so difficult. What do I say now?" But I think you'll have a perfect answer to this. If you could create one law that anyone would have to follow in the beverage industry, what would it be?
Oh gosh, this is funny. Okay, so I don't like laws, I don't like rules except the 14-day cleaning rule. So I wouldn't create a law, but what I would say is that as it relates to draft, okay,
Yeah.
everything that we do, the little things, the big things, do it with excellence and really shoot for the moon on the quality that we're providing, because when we're doing things right in draft, it really reflects to the customers and the people consuming our draft products at the point of dispense, and that's what makes the biggest difference. Somebody
Yeah.
caring when they go in. And that is, if I could make everybody do something I wanted them to do, it would be do everything with excellence, no matter how small, no matter how big the job.
And you did not disappoint me when I said you would give a perfect answer to this question.
Oh gosh, you're so sweet. I've
So
had
my
so much fun.
Me too. I have the last question for you. And
Sure.
before I ask, if anyone has any questions for Jennifer, please leave it on the comment section. We did have a lot of comments, by the way, from people, but it's mostly people saying how great you are.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank
Like
you.
that.
I was gonna say, I hope they weren't gonna be complaining. I don't
No,
know. When we get people to talk about draft, you never know.
let me just show you just some of the comments. So one of them with Chris McClellan, who is in New York City. He was a guest of Perfect Beer Talks webinar, and now he's the chief beer officer at Pabino. He said, "This is great. I'm the world's biggest proponent of quality draft practices, and I just heard a pub owner say to me yesterday that we're cutting back on draft line cleaning to once a month to save money,"
Yeah. This
which is
is tragic to me because I have a calculator for anybody that needs it that shows, based on the inner diameter of the tubing, how much beer they go through to do that cleaning. And I think too, if we can show the case studies for how cleanliness drives sales, which I'm happy to share with anybody after this,
Mhm.
those are things that are really important to combat that perception. Because Chris, I think that is something that I run into all the time. And people haven't seen that chart that we showed at the beginning from the BA
Mhm.
Association on the colony forming units that build up over X number of days. I think that was 1 to 28 days. But yeah,
Yes.
it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, yeah. So my last question for you, Jennifer, is: what is the best advice that you have ever received, and would you like to share it with our audience today?
Oh, sure. Oh gosh. Well, I go back to, believe it or not, my husband, I only married him because I thought he was cute. Really. It turned out it turned out he was super smart, which has been a bonus to me, for the last, I don't know, 28 years. And I've actually had people that knew me when I was young, they say, "You only married him because you thought he was cute." Yes, that's true. But it worked out all these years later, and he's put up with me. And I often feel bad for him because I've been many different people during our marriage. He's been the same. So God bless Drew. But early on, I think something that would surprise people about me is that early on, I spent so many hours and years in the back office supporting
Mhm.
my dad, supporting my mom, supporting my husband. And so it hasn't been until I would say when I came up with the concept for Draftline that I even would go into business meetings. So I was probably 37, 38 years old before I walked into a boardroom to present an idea for Draftline, let's say. And so that's a long time to not be forward facing to customers aside from answering phones. So I had a very high level of anxiety when I started traveling, talking to people, because I thought I'm just one of those people that assumes everyone knows more than I do. And so my husband said to me, I was headed over to see Diageo, and this was going to be my first sales call. And this is like through St. James Gate. So I was very nervous. This is years ago. And he said to me, he goes, if you don't know the answer to a question somebody asks you in that meeting, I don't know is a valid answer. He said, you can always say, I don't know, but I'll find out and I'll get back to you. And so almost every day, I'm in meetings all the time and I say, I don't know. Let me find out. And so that really gave me a freedom to go out there and realize that, you know what, I don't have to know everything, but if I work diligently, I'm truthful with all of my customers, prospective customers, and I give them the best information that I have at the time. And I can always get back to them because I know everybody in draft. And so
Mhm.
maybe somebody doesn't know, but I can always find the answer out. So that was a real freedom. I don't know is a valid answer. So that was probably the best advice I got because it served me well. The other thing I would say that because I had the freedom of that advice and the real realization that that is okay. Not everybody knows of everything. And I'm the subject matter expert. It's okay not to know everything. That was a big one, but also asking questions. I am in all types of meetings. I work with formulations chemists, chemical engineers, people that are um, programmers on different types of applications, on data stacks, on this, that, beer distributors. And I always say, I'm going to ask a stupid question because I just don't know. And everybody says after, oh, I didn't know either. At this point, I'm old and I'm tired, so I'm not afraid of what people think anymore. But I don't know. And ask a question anytime you get a chance because you'll
Yeah,
learn something.
yeah.
So hopefully that's a good answer. But
Great
yeah, that's
advice.
good advice. And also, the momentum thing. I'm sure I picked that up from somebody else. That was a good one.
Jennifer Hawk, thank you so much for joining Perfect Beer Talks webinar. If you want to share anything else with our audience, please go ahead and do so.
Oh, well, I have talked for so long, an hour and 20 minutes. I don't want to keep
Mhm.
anybody from their meetings, but I just want to say you've been an absolute pleasure. I
Thank
expect
you.
to see you either in New York or in Vegas at the Women's Alliance of Beer in October. And
For
thank you
sure.
so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. It is the longest webinar I have done thus far, which means I we have a lot to talk about. I'll do an episode 2 with you anytime you want to. So again, thank you so
Perfect.
much. We can see you in October in the US, and uh, thank you everyone for joining this episode. It was one of my favorites so far. I hope it was yours
Oh,
as well, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.
thank you, Enki. Cheers.
Cheers.